morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. How y'all doing? It's Kaiser. And well, we're talking again about Star Wars and George Lucas. And if you haven't already been able to tell, there's a lot of questions going on. So, as we all know, Disney has not done a particularly good job of being stewards of the sci fi franchise Star Wars, as they've still failed to even completely come up with the cost to actually make, covering Lucasfilm and buying it, profitable. But then a while back, we saw something just absolutely crazy happen after George Lucas appeared to back Bob Iger in the proxy fight with Nelson Pelts. And really, it was a mixture of a number of things that between George is throwing himself behind Bob Iger, and apparently also CEO Jamie Dimon of, I believe it was, JP Morgan Chase. Yeah. And it led a lot of people to ask, like, okay, why is George doing that? I mean, aside from the fact that his wife, Melody Hobson, literally sits on the JP Morgan Chase board of directors. Okay. Well, I mean, especially after he's made such comments about about selling Lucasfilm and Star Wars to Disney. Comments like this.
And everything in your body says don't, you can't. And these are my kids. So
All those Star Wars films.
all the Star Wars films.
They were your kids.
Yeah, well, they are right. I loved them. I created them. I'm very intimately involved in them, and obviously to
And
sell
you
them
sold
off.
them.
I sold them to the white slavers that take these things and
Okay, but having
Yeah. So George Lucas going out there telling Charlie Rose that he sold Star Wars to white slavers. Yeah, not exactly sounding like somebody who actually wants to do this stuff, and actually sounds like somebody who's kind of jilted over the whole thing, which is equally fascinating when he throws his entire backing behind Bob Iger in the proxy fight with Nelson Pelts. Okay, this guy is Bob Iger's already screwed you over once before, and now you're backing him. All right, doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. But now George has flipped again by saying that he thinks that we need to change that he needs to change his tune on this again. I mean, he went out saying that creating magic is not for amateurs, you know, against Nelson Peltz. But then in these articles, he blasts Disney for not understanding Star Wars and the Force. So this coming from that Park Place, Star Wars creator George Lucas blasted the Walt Disney Company for not understanding the franchise and story as well as the Force. During an appearance at the Cannes Film Festival last week, the Hollywood Reporter detailed that Lucas informed the crowd, quote, "I was the one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world, because there's a lot to it. The Force, for example, nobody understood the Force," unquote. He added, quote, "When they started off the other ones after I sold the company, a lot of the ideas that were in the original sort of got lost. But that's the way it is. You give it up, so you give it up," unquote. Lucas is famous for criticizing Disney for its treatment of the Star Wars franchise after he sold the company to them back in 2012. Ahead of the release of The Force Awakens in 2015, Lucas described Disney as white slavers in the interview with Charlie Rose. Disney CEO Bob Iger also noted that Lucas felt betrayed by Disney in his book, A Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years as CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Yeah, he felt betrayed because he gave you story treatments for episodes 7, 8, and 9, and you decided to throw them in the dumpster and then create the absolute garbage that was Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. So Iger had said, quote, "Now, the first meeting with him about the future of Star Wars, George felt betrayed, and while this whole process would have had never been easy for him, we'd gotten off to an unnecessarily rocky start," unquote. Yeah. And it's left a lot of questions there. So, of note, Lucas's comments also appear to contradict Lucasfilm's marketing push that Dave Filoni is the heir to George Lucas or that he was George's apprentice. The Mandalorian actor Jon Favreau recalled in a featurette and set visit from Lucas, quote, George visited the set when we were filming the lightsaber fight in the Japanese garden in season 2, unquote. Quote, I think it was really encouraging of Dave stepping up in this role, and so George would turn to Kathy and myself and be proud of Dave, unquote, he said. Quote, he was Dave's teacher and Dave was his apprentice, unquote. Yeah. Not really sure about that, especially with Lucas flat out saying that that's not true. And a lot of other things have kind of come to the surface on that. So George Lucas rejects Star Wars critics who think the first 6 films are about white men. Yeah. George Lucas got candid about criticism of the first 6 Star Wars films during a conversation at the Cannes Film Festival on Friday. When speaking about the success of the franchise ahead of receiving the festival's honorary Palme d'Or, Lucas reflected on some of the negative comments he received over the years. Quote, they would say, it's all white men, Lucas said of the film's critics. Most of the people were aliens. The idea is that you're supposed to accept people for who they are, whether they're big or furry or whether they're green or whatever. The idea is all people are equal, unquote. Lucas went on to say that the only beings in Star Wars universe who were discriminated against were the robots, or the droids, if you know the lingo. Quote, that was a way of saying, people are always discriminating against something, and sooner or later, that's what's going to happen, he said. I mean, we're already starting with AI saying, well, we can't trust those robots, unquote. As for the issue of race, Lucas said, quote, in the first one, there were a few Tunisians who were dark, and in the second one, I had Billy Williams, and the prequels, which they were also criticizing, I had Sam Jackson. He wasn't a scoundrel like Lando, he was one of the top Jedi, unquote. Lucas also responded to criticism about the depiction of women in Star Wars films, saying, quote, who do you think the heroes are in these stories? Who do you think the Princess Leia was? She was the head of the rebellion. She was the one taking this young kid who doesn't know anything and this boisterous I know everything guy who can't do anything and trying to save the rebellion with these clowns. And it's the same thing with Queen Amidala, unquote. He continued, quote, you can't just put a woman in pants and expect her to be a hero. They can wear dresses, they can be whatever they want. It's their brains and their ability to think and plan and be logistical. That's what a hero is, unquote. So, yeah, he had a lot to say about how his movies were kind of viewed by a lot of the critics and people that especially were not so nice to him in that regard, especially Bob Iger and a lot of others. Just so George is saying that basically, okay, I just got to be honest here. I mean, for somebody who has been, who defended Bob Iger, sounds like he doesn't have a lot of love for the guy or a lot of what other people, including Disney, have done for him. But yet he still backed him in the proxy fight with Nelson Pelts. So I'm not sure how, really where his head's at on that one. But on the topic of George returning to Star Wars, George Lucas not returning to Star Wars. Done making movies. Hollywood lacks imagination and tackles Marvel. Yep, here we go. So, regarding the rumors of a return to Star Wars, the rumor recently came about when Lucas, the Star Wars second unit director, said he thinks Lucas is coming back to Star Wars. However, at the end of an interview with France's Brute 9, George Lucas is asked if he will make another movie. A very last one? No, he said, I'm retired. The last one I did as a producer was a thing called Strange Magic, which is an animated film. So I was done doing I was doing movies that I really wanted to do. I was financing myself and had my own studio. Lucas continued with mentioning he is keeping busy with another project. Quote, I'm building a museum in Los Angeles. It's keeping me very busy, unquote, he said. Lucas was also asked where he sees the movie business in 10 years. Quote, same thing as it is now. The stories they're telling are just old movies. Let's do a sequel. Let's do another version of this movie. There's no original thinking. The big studios, they don't have an imagination, unquote, he said. And Apparently, he has been a little critical of, the Marvel franchise. I guess he's a little bit less critical than Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese famously saying that the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Marvel movies in general are not cinema. Well, Lucas basically said, that they technically are, but he kind of lets slip that he's not really about it. So, quote, look, cinema is the art of moving image, Lucas explained. So if the image moves, then it's cinema. I think Marty has kind of changed his mind a little bit, Lucas said. So I mean, he's saying that they are cinema, but he's not really saying that they're great cinema. I'll be completely honest with you. And he's saying that maybe Martin Scorsese's views have kind of changed a little bit, but that's kind of neither here nor there. But the fundamental fact of the matter is that despite defending Bob Iger, the very person who he chanted, that he had sold his creation to white slavers, has gone on the press tour and basically decried a whole bunch of stuff and saying that he blasts Disney for saying that they don't understand the Star Wars and the Force. Well, George, I'm sorry, but it's too little too late, and you have only yourself to blame for what's going on. You had a chance to stand up against the big guy, but no, you didn't. And to a degree, I understand why. You got to protect those pensions, those shares, and all that other kind of stuff. But at the same time, as somebody who has always stood as a rebel filmmaker trying to do his own thing without the aid of the studio system, you became the very thing that you really just didn't like. And that's sad. Anyway, folks, definitely let me know what you're thinking in the comment section down below. Definitely hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.